As Debbie said, you have clickers there in front of you, but before I forget, let me talk to you about a little bit about tomorrow, because I'm sure as soon as we're finished, everyone wants to quickly exit. So yesterday we were discussing some of the mixtures, and a couple of the presenters have been approached by people in the attendees here that you really want some of these difficult examples, and Dr. Buckleton worked through a couple of examples in the three-person mixture examples. So what we decided last night was to take 2 of the 5 mixture examples that you have in your packet, and you have 5 examples, both with PowerPlex 16 Hot Start and Identifiler Plus. So we made an executive decision, without any bias toward Promega, that we would focus only on Identifiler Plus, so that everyone else is sort of on the same page with which profile we're going to be looking at. So we're going to focus on the Identifiler Plus, and the first 2 examples, or Mixture 1 and Mixture 2. Mixture 1 is a 50-50 example where there's an equal contribution, and example or Mixture 2 is a major minor where there's a clear distinct major versus minor, and everything is fairly above stochastic threshold, so there's no real stochastic issues with that example. So what we thought was, for those 2 examples, because they're fairly straightforward, we would try to go through those quickly, and in doing so, we decided to give some homework. So when you leave today, outside where the check-in, the sign-in sheet, we've provided to you a sheet with the information about example 1, which is actually mixture 2, the major minor, and example 2, which is mixture 1. This bad coordination on my part. Sorry. So for the 50-50 mixture, there's some information here. Assume that the evidence is, from a glove or whatever, and only focus on these specific markers. So we don't have to deconvolute the entire mixture. Let's just focus on 2 or 3, and so that way you won't have to spend a lot of time doing it, and we can get through those fairly quickly. And then we'll focus more on the major with a very low minor, where you do have stochastic effects in that mixture, and then there are 2 3-person mixtures that we'll also look at tomorrow. Attached also to the homework is another problem that Todd Bill brought to the table, which is basically a 50-50 equal contribution, but you do have alleles that are around the stochastic range. So if you want to look at that one too, we could show. That's not in your handout, but it's on the table. Yes. So on the the loci to look at are actually on this handout page, D21, D2, and FGA. So
probably find FGA, D2 I'm not familiar with.
So you can refer to the other Identifiler Plus from the 5 handouts to see which one is which too. So if there's, just come up afterwards and I can give you more info. Okay. So we'll try to move along with the clickers. We're hoping that maybe we could spend a little bit of time in the discussion here. If there's questions or if there's comments, please feel free. But the clickers are meant to be an anonymous way for you to respond to these questions. These are questions that we asked at the Promega workshop. Unfortunately, we didn't have the clickers at the time, so everyone sort of jotted down their response. But I thought it would be interesting to see in an instant feedback what people thoughts they may have about specific questions that we asked during the workshop. We'll also try to incorporate questions tomorrow as we go through some of these examples. Would you do this? Would you do that? Kind of thing. So as Deborah said, you have on your clicker 1 through 0, or A through J. And so if there's 4 potential answers, as Debbie said, if you answered 5, then your answer won't count. So let's start off with a basic, easy question, just to test out the clicker. What's your favorite color? 1 is violet, 2 is indigo, 3 is blue, 4 is green, 5 is yellow, 6 is orange, and 7 is red. So I can see, maybe kind of tough to see, but in the, there's 90 responses so far. How do you work this? Okay, so we have 100 responses thus far, so that might be hitting max. Someone else just answered, so. All right, so we'll go, as soon as we hit about 100 or so, we'll stop the polling. So is anyone else having an issue with clicking your answer? Okay. All right, so there we go. So it looks like most people like blue and green, with several red too. Okay, so that's sort of how it works to give you an instant feedback. So here's a question about what is your role in the laboratory? 1, an analyst. 2, a technician. 3, database analyst. 4, a technical leader. Quality assurance manager. This again was from Promega, so attorney. I hope we probably know attorneys. Is Jules still? He's left. Okay, so what is your role in the laboratory? This is actually not a PowerPoint, it's a turning point. Where is it? Yeah. I don't know. Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we'll stop here. Actually, I can give you I can add a timer here, so it's counting down. Those of you stragglers, I know there's at least 2 of you out there that haven't clicked yet, so it's too late now. All right. There we go. So looks like most of the audience we have have our DNA analysts with quite a few technical leaders too, so very nice. What's your experience? How long have you been, not just a DNA analyst, but how long have you been in the field, so to speak? So trainee, less than 2 years. Answer 3 is 2 to 5. 5 to 10 years, 10 plus, or just 6 is not an analyst, but let's just say, so everyone can respond. Okay. Okay. So most people, nearly half the audience, has almost 10 years plus experience. So very nice. 5 to 10 years, it's quite a bit of experience. How much court testimony experience do you have? You haven't testified 1 to 10 times for 2, 11 to 25, more than 50. One more time and I'll need a good shrink. Okay, so we got some people coming back. People are coming back into the questioning now, so all right, we'll stop it there. Wow, so it's a pretty good cross-section. Quite a few. Wow, we got a few people that need a good shrink, I guess. All right. Just to get a feel of how large your lab is, how many DNA analysts are in your lab? 2 to 4, 5 to 10, 11 to 20, 21 to 50 or over 51. Let's just say in your lab. Okay, there we go. We're up to 100, so about 33% have 5 to 10. So looks like over half of the audience have 10 people or less in their lab. So, okay, so for the next series of questions, answer the questions based upon what you think. It doesn't have to be consistent with your lab protocol or your lab policy or what your role is in the lab. Again, these are anonymous, so don't feel like we're going to be able to pick you out. So feel free to answer it the way that you think. So just to get a poll here, have you read the SWGDAM guidelines? Yes, no, what guidelines? Who's SWGDAM? I'm just like Jules. Who is SWGDAM? So I'm thinking about reading them now. I don't know how to get access to them, or I was told not to read them. Okay, so we have 100 responses now. Okay, so very good majority of the group has read the guidelines. Equal amount here have not or are planning to. Okay. The next question, after reading the guidelines, for those of you that answered yes, do you strongly agree, just agree, you're neutral, there's some points or sections that you don't like, you disagree, you strongly disagree, or you'd like to meet with the authors, and I've got one right here, so. Okay. All right, so I think based upon the number that said they read the guidelines, we're pretty well ready to stop. Okay, so for the most part, it looks like a lot of you agree and that there's a pretty good percentage, 33% or so have some points or sections that they don't like. Does anyone want to feel brave enough to bring up a point or so that you might be willing to share, or maybe we could do that over a beverage or something? Okay. So you don't have to reveal you don't have to disclose your anonymity here. So, okay, so has your laboratory decided to implement any changes to your SOP based upon the new guidelines? Yes, no, reviewed the SOP, but we decided that we didn't need to change it, or we're working on it right now. Okay, well, we're getting close there, so. Okay, so yes, about 38% here, 39% about equal amount people are working on it, so, okay. Again, if there's anything that you'd like to ask questions on or discuss, please feel free. This is a question about the literature. So I talked about the ISFG paper from 2006 that John Buckleton's on. There's the Badoli paper from 2009. So have you read any of these papers? You've read them both as answer 3. You've read neither, and you haven't heard of either paper prior to yesterday. Okay. Oh, well, excellent. I'm glad to see this. So the majority of people have read both papers. The ISFG paper only 4%. So if I'm not mistaken, John, I think that paper is on the ISFG website, freely available. So please feel free to visit the ISFG website. You don't have to be a member. There's a section there that you can look at these DNA Commission papers. They're made freely available. So please feel free to take that and download if you wish. I'm curious, this was a question that I took out, but how many labs or how many of you have laboratories that have access to JFS? Okay, so how about FSI Genetics? Okay, excellent. Okay, so this was a question that I showed in my presentation from the Promega meeting. What is your analytical threshold? Less than 49, 50 is answer number 2, and then up to greater than 150. Okay. So it's very similar to, I think, to the plot that I had in that paper, where a lot of labs are at around 50 RFUs, but there's several labs that are over 50. Okay. Do you think that your threshold, your analytical threshold, is too high, too low, just right, or I need to think about it? Remember, this is you answering and not what your laboratory policy may be. So feel free to answer on your own. Oh, we got someone who decided not to answer. Okay. So 99, we'll stop it there. Okay, so most people think that their threshold is just right. A few, 30%, so think that it's too high. Okay. Very few think that it's too low. This is a question we've talked about over the last few days, but according to the guidelines 3.5.8.3, do you ever include stutter as a potential minor allele? Yes, but only if it matches the suspect. Yes, and we make that determination prior to looking at the suspect, and no, we don't do this. Okay, we'll stop here. Okay, so it's good to see. Yes, we make that determination prior to looking at the suspect, or 35% say no, we do not do this. So that's interesting. Okay, this is a question about consistency within your laboratory. Would you strongly agree that you have consistency within your lab? Rules are set and followed absolutely. Would you agree most of the time that interpretation is consistent? You're neutral, you disagree, or you strongly disagree. It's like the Wild West. All right, we're going to have to put the countdown now. There we go. So most labs, well, 60% of respondents say that they agree or strongly agree that there's consistency. 30% disagree. That's pretty consistent with what we found at the Promega meeting too. Do you currently attempt to determine the number of contributors? Yes, no, it depends on the case and how complicated it is, or we use CPE or CPI, so we don't need to estimate the number of contributors. Okay. So almost 60% say yes, and about 22% say they don't, or 24%. What's the primary means that you use to determine the number of contributors? So do you look at the ratio of amylogenin XY, or do you look at the number of alleles at a single locus? Do you look at the number of alleles at multiple loci? Do you look at peak-height ratio imbalance? Do you do a combination of 3 and 4 with the number of alleles and the peak-height ratio? Or do you don't attempt to look at the number of contributors? Okay. So most labs use both 3 and 4, so looking not only at the number of alleles, but also the peak height imbalance. So that's fairly consistent with, again, what we saw in the meeting in Promega. So this is a question that discusses about the number of contributors to a sample. What do you think are the minimum number of alleles and loci needed to determine if you have a mixture? Do you need to see greater than 2 alleles at greater than 2 loci, or greater than 2 alleles at greater than 1 locus, or you just look at for a single peak height ratio imbalance of less than 60%, or you really haven't thought about it? So again, this is what you think. It may not be necessarily what your laboratory policy may be. Okay. So greater than 2 alleles at greater than 2 loci, about 60%. So that's good. Do you use mixture proportions or donor ratios in to deduce mixtures? Yes or no? Okay. So 73% yes, 27% no. All right, we only have a couple more questions here to go. Do you interpret your evidence, that is, you lock down your inferred genotypes independent of your alleged contributor? Always, most of the time, sometimes, rarely, or never? Okay. So always 54%, most of the time 37%. This is very, very similar to what we previously observed at the Promega meeting. What kind of mixture statistics does your lab use? So the likelihood ratio, the random man not excluded, CPE, CPI, RMP, a combination of CPE and RMP. I think this is what Karen was talking about today, so that's for labs that do that. Other combinations may be, well, we do likelihood ratio and we do, so that would be in number 5. Or to use the probabilistic modeling like Dr. Buckleton's dropout or Mark Perlin's true allele. So. Okay. So, okay, looks like most labs are using the CPE or random match probability, a combination, I guess, depending upon the type of mixture you have. Other combinations, okay. Do you use any kind of software to help you with your mixture calculations? So there's PopStats, GMapper ID X has mixture component, iCubed, GMarker, which is a different software, TrueAllele, DNAView, an in-house Excel program, or do you do it painfully on a calculator, or is there some other method? And this is actually the last question, so great, we got 100 responses. So the majority of labs are using PopStats, but also quite a few labs have an in-house Excel program to help, okay? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. One thing I should also mention for the examples for homework and for tomorrow, we will assume an analytical threshold of 50 RFUs and a stochastic threshold of 150 RFUs, okay? So let's assume that so we're all on the same field. And if you have any other questions, please feel free. But we'll see you tomorrow, unless Debbie has any other announcements.